Hello everyone. This video will teach you how to do the things you need to do in SQL in order to accomplish Lab 6. So in Lab 6 we'll be doing some alter table statements, we'll be setting up default values, doing joins, doing some other SQL functions like sums and not in clauses, that kind of thing. So this video is important to watch before you do Lab 6. What I'll do is go through each question in the lab and show you how to do something similar in this test database, this bookstore database, which is the same database I used to demonstrate some of the concepts for Lab 5. So you'll remember we've got these 4 tables which I've already created in my SQL Server database, and I've already added some records to them. So let's go through the questions in the lab, and I'll show you how to do those functions in this test database. Okay. So here we have our lab. Just to remind everyone, make sure you put comments in your code, like these green things here. And make sure when you paste in your screenshots that you have both your code, and if you're doing a select query, you should show your results here. If you're doing something like an alter or something that changes the structure of your table, you should show the output that you get when you run your alter statement, such as, SQL will say command completed successfully. So just the screenshot should show me both your code and should show me that the code actually worked. So what do we have to do? The first thing you have to do in your lab, it asks you to alter a table and put in some default values. So how do you do that? Well, let's go over to our database here, our bookstore database, and let's say we wanted to modify the publisher table to add 2 new columns. Well, we'll go to SQL. Now let's see what's in the publisher table. Okay, so we've got our 3 publishers there. Let's go to the list of tables. Now I've got my Lab 5 and 6 tables mixed in with my test tables for the bookstore database. But here's our publisher table. Okay, so let's say I wanted to add 2 columns. One column I'm going to use to track which user is adding records to the rows, and the other one is going to keep track of when each row was added to the table. So in order to alter a table, you just say alter table and then the table name. So comment, add, let's call it created, or maybe row insert date. So alter table publisher, there's the table name, and we're going to add something called row insert date. That'll be a date time. Okay, and we're going to say default get date. So what that'll do is every time a row is inserted, if someone doesn't explicitly specify a value for the row insert date, it'll get set to the current date. So run that. I just hit F5, which is the same as execute. Now let's see what we've got here. Okay, row insert date null. When you add a default to a table, it won't populate the values for rows that already exist. It will only populate values for new rows. So let's say we wanted to add a row, and let's say we're not going to specify row insert date. So insert into publisher. We need our list of columns because we are not inserting to all columns. And then values, publisher 4, publisher name. Okay, so let's try running this. Okay, oops, I always forget about that. Okay, now let's see what we have. Now you can see, because of our default on this column, when we insert new rows, it puts in the exact date time that the row was inserted. Let's add another column to our table. Add, maybe we can call this row inserted by. So this is actually going to tell us who inserted the row. Because when you're logged into SQL Server, you always provide a username so it knows who you are. So again, alter table publisher. We're going to add row inserted by, and that is going to be, let's say, varchar. I don't know how long the usernames are, 20 maybe. And then this default is going to be this user keyword, which always stores, if you, for example, go select user, this just stores the name, of the person who's logged in currently to the database. So let's add this. Okay, let's see what's in the publisher table. Now let's add another row. Just copying and pasting. Let's try D5. Okay, let's run this, and when we run this next insert for this new row, it should put in my username. Okay, there we are. So you can see we added 2 columns, and we put in defaults for both, one being the current date time and one being the current user. So that should tell you all you need to know to do this. Now, what are you going to do for the next thing? So the project timetable. There's a few steps here, and you should provide a screenshot for each step. A, B, C, D, and so on. So what do you need to do to the project time? Delete all rows, drop primary key, add columns, drop columns, add a column, create a new primary key. So how do you delete all rows? Well, let's say we go to our, what table? Let's go to our book author table. Maybe we can fool around with that table. Okay, you see we have 4 rows. How do you delete all the rows? So how do you do this? Delete all rows in table. Just delete from table name. Now if you wanted to delete only certain rows, oops, I spelled this wrong. You can have a where clause, like you could say delete from book author where book ID equals 2. But we don't want to do that, we want to delete everything, so let's just run this. Okay, now we don't have any rows. If we select again, we have nothing. Good. So that's how you delete all rows. How do you drop a primary key? Well, it's kind of, you're going to use an alter table statement. So alter table, book author. So how would we drop our primary key? Let's see what it's called. Go to keys. Okay, we have a primary key called book author PK. So we can just say alter table book author drop book author PK. Now I can't remember if you have to put in the word constraint. No, you don't. You just give the name of the table and the primary key. Now if I refresh this, see, now we no longer have a primary key. This is the foreign key. If we go to columns, you can see these aren't marked as primary keys anymore. They're just gray, which indicates only foreign keys. Okay, so now you know how to drop a foreign key. What's next? Drop columns. Okay. I don't think I want to drop any columns from book author. because there's a foreign key there, so I think the best thing for me to do would be, let's select star from author. Maybe we can drop something from author. Let's say we don't care about the author middle initial. How do we drop this column from author? Alter table author, drop author MI. Pretty simple. Oops, not a constraint. You actually, I guess, need this keyword column here. So when you're dropping a constraint, you just say drop and then the constraint name. If you're dropping a column, you have to say drop column. Okay. Now let's see if that column's gone. Good. So we've got ID, first name, last name, and no middle initial. Okay, so now you know how to drop columns. How do you add a column? Okay. Let's say we want to add a column to our author table. Well, we can say alter table author, add column, or actually I don't think you need column. You can just say add, what else do we care about? Maybe we could say street address 1, Barker 100, and no, just in case some authors don't have addresses in our system. Let's do that. Success. And there we go. That's how you add a column. And finally, how do you create a primary key? Okay, let's go back to our book author table where we deleted the primary key before. So let's add the primary key back to our book author table. Alter table book author, add, and then I believe it's constraint. Got to give it a name. Let's give it the same name as before. And then which columns? Same columns as before. In your lab, you'll be creating the new primary key differently than the old primary key existed. But in this example, I'm just going to recreate the same primary key. Okay. I think this will work. Oops. Isn't it called book author? Oh, I forgot table. Alter table book author. Oop, I have to say what kind of constraint it is. So I'm going to alter this table, add the constraint. Excuse me, sneeze there. Add this constraint. It's a primary key on these fields. So you'll notice that this code is pretty much the same code you would put in your create statement for a table. But in this case, we're altering this table and adding this constraint. Okay, now let's refresh our table. Okay, now you can see, yep, we have our yellow key and our primary key is back. Okay, so now you know how to do everything for number 2. Delete all rows, drop a primary key, drop columns, and add a primary key. Now for this, you're going to be getting the file from Blackboard, from the Lab 6 folder, and running it in your database. But you don't need a screenshot for that because it's just my own code. So let's move on to number 4. So in this one, you're going to need to write a select query that joins 2 tables and then returns some data from each table. So how do you do that? Well, first let's say what we want to do is we want to write a query that's going to show information from the book table and the publisher table. So let's say we want book title, book year, and publisher name. So how would we do that in a query? Well, start with select. I'm going to skip down to the from clause. We'll decide what fields after. So what tables will we be retrieving data from? Book and publisher. So book and publisher. Now, what's very important that you do is to join your tables on the common field using the where clause. If you don't join the tables, you'll get what's called a Cartesian product, which is basically as many rows as there are in the book table times the publisher table. So basically every row from one table multiplied by every row from the other table. So if you don't, use a where clause. So you definitely want a where clause. So you want to join book dot what field. So we're going to join book ID here. So basically you're saying in one of my tables is my book table, so the book ID field matches to the publisher ID. So I want to join the book table to the publisher table on publisher ID. So that's how you tell SQL how to match these two tables. You match them on the common field. Now what do I want to show? Let's say I want to show book title, book pages, and publisher name. Here's how I do it. Let's run it. There. So for each book I have the pages and the publisher name. Now I believe there was something in the lab about sorting. Let's see. Sort by this. Okay. So just as a reminder on how to sort, you just say order by. So let's say we want to order by publisher name and then book title. Do it like that. I only have a few records, so okay, good, it's sorted. Put this publisher first, and then for this publisher, it put this book first because that book comes before this book in the alphabet. So that's how you do a join with an order by. So that takes care of number 4. Number 5, we have a join with 3 tables. So a 3-table join is pretty similar to a 2-table join, except you're going to need to join 2 different columns here. You're actually going to have 2 items in your where clause because you have 3 tables. Why don't we make a join that does book, author, and book author? So we can show each book and its authors, because each book can have more than one. So I usually do my right select first, then I go and do my from clause first before I type in which fields I want to select. So we need book, we need author, and book author. And again, don't forget you need your where clause to join these. Now first, I need to join my book and my book author table. So book.bookid equals book author dot bookid. Now here's the tricky part. That only joins these 2 tables, but we have 3 tables in our query. 1, 2, 3. So now I have to join this table with this table. These ones join on author ID. So we say and author dot author ID equals book author dot author ID. That should work. Oh yeah, we have to say what columns we want. Let's say we'll just show book title, and let's show author first name, author last name. Okay. Let's run this and see if it works. We have nothing. Oh, yeah, I know why we have nothing. You'll remember that we actually deleted all the records from our book author table before. So let's put them back. I have here my queries that I used in the video from last week to add data to my tables. So I'm going to run these insert statements to put my 4 records that I had back into my book author table. Now when I go to run this query, actually join book and publisher table, I should put comments in so I won't forget which query is which. Join 3 tables. Now when I run it, you can see I get the data I should. So because I'm joining to a bridge table, what I'm showing in this query is the many-to-many relationship between book and author. So Tolstoy wrote, well, he didn't really write The Old Man and the Sea, but in my table it says he did. Hemingway wrote The Sun Also Rises, and then here we have a case where this book was written by 2 authors. So here we have one book with multiple authors, and if we look at these 2 rows, we have one author who wrote many books. Okay, so that's how you join 3 tables. Number 6. So how do you show all consultants who have not put any time into projects? Okay, so consultants who do not have records in the project timetable. So I think the best way we can show this kind of thing in this database is, why don't we add another author, but we won't put any records for him in the book author table. And then we can show how to do a query to show all the authors who do not have any records in book author. So let's add to our author table. Okay. So let's do an insert. I think that we will use the list of fields. Oops. So we can skip the fields that can be null just to save time. Okay, we'll just insert to these 3 rows. Okay, let's do author ID 3. How do you spell that? Like that? Okay. I'm not sure if I spelled that right. But anyway, let's insert this. Good. Now, select. So what I'll do is, let me show, I'm just moving this code down. Let me show what's in the author table and what's in the book author table. Just going to run both these queries. So you can see we've got 3 authors now. Now Tolstoy and Hemingway, author ID 1 and 2, they both have records in the author table. We just added John Steinbeck, and so he has no records in the book author table. You can see author ID 3 is not here. So how would we show all authors from this table who do not have any records in the book author table? Well, you can use what's called a not in clause. So let's say select, and let's say we want to show author first name, author last name from the author table. What you do is you say where author ID not in, and then you're going to use what's called a subquery, and you say author ID is not in the subquery, select author ID from book author. And you can run this subquery, on its own just to see what it returns. So that just returns a list of author IDs. But you're going to show all authors who do not have an author ID in that table. And you can see John Steinbeck. So that's a big hint on how to do number 6. Now, how about number 7? Number 7. So we want to show project ID and project status for project with earliest start date. Hint, you'll need to use a subquery. So how can we do that in this data model? Let's take a look. I wonder if what we can do is maybe show the author. Maybe what we could do is say, how would we show the author with the earliest birth date? Well, let's see what's in our author table. Okay. So, why don't we write an update statement? I don't think there were any update statements required for the lab, but that was explained in the readings and the lab manual. So updates are important to learn. So let's say we're going to set date of birth equal to Hemingway, let's say 1/1/1902, where author ID equals 2. So that's how you do an update statement. Just say the name of the table you want to update, the value you want to change, and a where clause to say which row you want to change. And finally, John Steinbeck. So I'm just going to copy and paste this update statement. And by the way, if I were to run this update statement without a where clause, if I just ran this, excuse me, it would update all the rows in the table. But we don't want to do that. So let's change Steinbeck's date of birth. Maybe we'll put, I don't know, 1894. Okay, now everything should be updated. So now all 3 authors have a date of birth. So how would we show the author name for the author with the earliest date of birth? Well, you need to use another subquery. Let's say we want to say author first name, author last name, oops, from author. Now where date of birth equals, now here's the subquery, select min date of birth from author. Okay, so basically what happens is first SQL Server figures out the value of this. Okay, the min date of birth is 1823, which is for Tolstoy. Now it's going to find the author with that date of birth and show his name. So there is a subquery. So that should be a big help when you're trying to do this one. What's the next one? Create a select query that shows the duration of a project. Okay, and you'll need to use dateDiff. So for duration, what you need to do is this dateDiff function. Now in order to show this in my data model, I think we'll need to add another date field to one of my tables. Let's see what's in author. Now in the author table, we have a date of birth. Why don't we also put in a date of death, and that way we can show how to do a dateDiff function. So let's alter our author table. Let's add a column called date of death, and that will be a date time. Oh, I guess column is not necessary. Oops. Oh, so it did add it before, didn't it? What's going on? Why isn't it letting me do that? Date of death. Alter table author. It's pretty strange. Oh, it did add it before. Okay. So somehow it did add it. But anyway, we've got a date of death. Now let me show you a little trick if you want to enter values in a table quickly, kind of like you did in Access. What you can do is you can right click on a table, which I just did, but it's taking its time, and then say edit top 200 rows. And this will let you actually just type in values into that table instead of having to write update statements. So I want to put in some date of deaths. Okay, Tolstoy, I don't know, 1901. Okay, what about Hemingway? I think it was around 1960. And Steinbeck, let's see, maybe he 1972. Just guessing here. Oh, okay, that was not smart. I put those dates into the wrong column. So I can just actually hit cut, paste, cut, paste, cut, paste. And here, it put in a blank string, so let me put the nulls back in. I'm just typing null, no quotes. Okay, now we've got the date of death and the date of birth. Now we should be able to calculate the number of years that each author lived. So there we go, you see date of birth, date of death. So the way to do that is with date diff. Now when you do your date diff for your lab, you're going to show the number of days the project duration is. In this case we're going to show years. So you'll need to just Google that date diff function, or I'm sorry, the date diff function, to see exactly how to use it. But I'll show you an example with doing the diff of number of years. So what you say is select, and let's put the author name, first name, last name, and then date diff. So the interval is what you want to measure, and there's specific codes for each interval. I think day is DD, year is YY for 2-digit year. And what's next? I believe next is the first date, which is date of birth, and then the ending date, which is date of death, from author. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so you can see how long each author lived. Oh, I guess I put in the same lifespan for these two. So here you can see, that's how you use date diff. So what's next? One more thing to do. So in this number 9, your last question, you're going to count the total hours that have been spent on project ID 2. So you'll have to use a sum. How do you do a sum? Well, in our data model, what could we sum? Maybe what we could do is sum the book pages. And how would you sum that? Select, let's do a select star from author, or no, from book, just to see what data we have there. Okay, so how would we figure out, let's say we want to sum all of the number of pages from the books with publisher ID 3. Pretty simple. Select sum of book pages from the book table, and then our where clause. For your lab, you're saying where project ID is 2, but here we're going to say where publisher ID equals 3. And there it is, 465. Let's run these both at once just to make sure it adds up. So 145 plus 320 is 465, so it worked. Okay, so I hope that video was useful. After watching this video, you should be able to figure out how to do all these different functions called for in the lab. Just don't forget your comments and your screenshots, which should include the code and the results. So I hope that video was useful, and you can contact me if you have any problems. Thank you very much, and good luck.